listening to JC Direct on ClassicFM 102.7. In our Outtake Spotlight this evening, we're going to be chatting Vox Telecom. Got Doug Reed on the line. Just before I go through to Doug, just a bit around the company. As Francois was saying, market cap around 730 million. Share price today was bouncing 71.72, which puts it up about 12 or 14%. On the back of a 5% move on Friday, remembering no market yesterday, so Friday was the last move. Puts it a PE of around 10 times. Results were out Friday. We're going to chat that, but I'm going to go back a bit, first get some history on the company. With that, Doug Reed, CEO of Vox Telecom, thanks very much for coming on the show this evening.
No, it's a pleasure. Good evening.
I want to, before we touch on the results, I want to go, as I said, back in time. You guys, Vox, in a different name back then, really started sort of 97 dotcom boom time.
Yes, we started sort of late 97, went into the internet space probably later than the majority of the companies that had started. Most of them started 95. And then basically what we did was we focused on the SME market. Rather than dial-ups and rather than big corporates, we went into the sort of mid-range sort of business.
Okay, and is that, I mean, there a lot of companies from that period, and I mean, I've spoken to a few who survived, but not many did survive when the dot-com bubble went bust.
Yes, when it went bust, there was probably about 80 ISPs at the time, and we were one of the few that was actually generating cash. We weren't making a profit, but we were generating a little bit of cash, and that enabled us to absorb a lot of the weaker players. And that really got us off the ground and made us sort of stand out. And then at the end of that bubble, we were in the top 4 in terms of corporate ISP scenarios.
And then when did you list onto the Altex?
We listed sort of late October, I can't even remember now. I think it was about 2005.
Okay, so one of the early listings onto the market.
Yes, we were actually almost the first. I mean, I think we were the second on the board, or third on the board, or fourth on the board. And we did an IPO, so we were one of the first to do an IPO. And we did it again mainly because we were in a management. We were owned by Nedbank Private Equities, and we were basically on the chopping block, and they were selling us to the highest bidder. And it was just almost a survival technique to list as opposed to be sold at that stage.
Okay. And Vox Telecom, I mean, the strapline, leading alternative independent telecom operator providing voice and data in the Southern African market. So you really are internet, but internet's not what it was back in 97. As you say, it's voice, it's data, it's least cost routing. You're operating across the broad ambit?
No, we started off as an internet service provider, and then we moved into the voice. So we realized, obviously, as a service provider, it's obviously fairly limited and a fairly limited market. And then we burnt our fingers a bit over the years. I mean, we were very early entrants into the VoIP space, etc. But that's now paying off because we've got the experience in the hard-end yards. And then we consolidated fairly madly during the sort of boom times, which I think was quite good for us. We made some mistakes as well along the line. But at the end of the day, basically what we're doing is we're merging the company, or slowly evolving the company into a virtual telco with service providers. We're keeping the service providers, as units because they are supply agnostic. They supply, they've supplied Telkom, Neotel, Vodacom services, etc., as well as Vox Telecom services to the customers, and they're quite customer-centric.
Do you have your own network, or are you buying from other sources?
No, we have our own network. We have a fully fledged network. We have interconnects with all the major vans. We, in fact, dominate that interconnect traffic. We probably 80-90% of that market. And then in terms of least cost routing, obviously that's a big component of Vox Orion, which is a voice business. And we dominate that as well. I think we have the predominant market share there as well. So in little niches we dominate, and then on the telco side, that's beginning to work. Now, obviously that's difficult because we're hampered by regulation and we're hampered by incumbents, policies, etc. But, it's now, I think, getting to the economies of scale where we can compete quite effectively.
I want to go into the least cost routing, the Ryan and the like, but just jumping back a moment, the CCOM undersea cable lands in June. You've got your own network. That's going to be, I mean, is Game Changer a fair comment? Certainly it's going to be a big deal for you guys.
It is going to make a big change, not quite as big as everybody envisages. It's not quite as cheap as it looks. The traffic's got to be carried around the country, and it's only it's a component of our input costs, and not, it's not 100% of our input costs. But it is going to be, it's certainly going to make life It doesn't put us in a new era in South Africa.
Well, as I say, new era, because no longer is it a Telkom monopoly, there's a CCom, and then there are others following. So it's not going to make necessarily a sea change to my bill or anything like that, but it's certainly going to help. It's changing the playing field.
Yes, what will happen is you'll get more bang for your buck. Mm-hmm. So if you were spending 250 Rand before getting a limited amount, you're now going to be spending 250 Rand with 10 times that amount. Well,
more certainly for a home user, more bandwidth, more speed, etc., etc., which is what we're looking for more than anything else. You touched on deregulation. I mean, my sense when I chat to people is yes, it's happening. Yes, it's still slow. Is that a fair comment?
Well, now you've got your natural barriers to entry. So it's an economy of scale business, so it's not easy to just jump in. I mean, you can see how long it's taken Vodacom Business and Airtel to get off the ground. Mm-hmm. So it's not easy to jump in. We believe we're well positioned because we've got the customers. So that does help us. And then we can convert as it makes sense. So if, for example, we're supplying a customer with service, various different niche services, telco services, it's much easier to add our own Vox Telecom services as they become viable and economical.
Back to Orion, which is the largest portion of Vox Telecom. That really is your corporate and retail client, as you were saying, the least cost routing and the like.
Yes, although Orion are now selling data as well, and Orion is a high-end corporate supplier focusing on managed telcos or managed telecom services. So they're at the top end of the market. DataPro is sort of the middle end. They obviously came out of an ISP stable and moving into voice. And then Atlantic is the consumer end.
The DataPro, the Orion, I was chatting to Francois a moment ago and we were talking numbers before we came on air. And the one thing, I mean, least cost routing, and that's when, for the listeners out there, I sit in a business, I dial a mobile number or whatever, and the system works out the cheapest way to connect me. It's a tough business out there, but that's a business which saves business money. So it must be tough, but not the hardest sell in the world.
Yes, look, on the least cost routing, it's a pretty mature market, so it's fairly saturated. So we are affected by the economy to the extent that there's less usage. Mm-hmm. But saying that, Orion are attacking other segments of the market that they never had before, like the data and like the rest of the voice business. So the least cost routing of Orion's originally was confined to outbound cellular minutes. Mm-hmm. Now, with the partnerships with Telkom and Invoke Telecom, our own telco, we can focus on the rest of the minutes, the national fixed line minutes, the international minutes, and the inbound minutes. So it increases the size of the pie quite dramatically.
And you touched on it. I mean, this is a competitive space. I mean, in the one end, we've got the Telcoms and the Vodacoms and the Neotels. Even just we've got the Telemasters and Eltex. Barrier to entry is hard, but there's a lot of people in already. So a competitive market space to operate in.
Yes, but not many people that are as comprehensive as us in that alternative sector.
So one of your benefits is that way.
The entire gambit of services, not just niche.
Yeah, so you can offer the A to Z rather than just the M&N type of scenario.
Yes, and again, it's an evolutionary process. Like a lot of the customers are moving into that. They're not necessarily just automatically taking the lot.
Yeah, and corporate customers, how many corporate customers do you have?
Businesses, we have about 18,000.
Yeah, also. And that's across the spectrum from small SMEs upwards?
Yes, right up to the major, I think we've got about 60% of the top JSE's top 200.
Wow. And how much of that income is largely annuity?
Well, all the data business it's contracted and it's fixed, so that's fairly easy, although it is moving into usage-based. Mm-hmm. And the same with the consumers. The voice business is annuity, but it varies. It depends on, we are seasonal, so like April will be a much worse month.
Yeah, because no one was at work.
Yeah, because there's more holidays and more people on leave.
Yeah. Turning to Atlantic, I mean, I was a very early subscriber to Atlantic. Your retail offering, but this is done via a franchise operation, am I correct?
Yes, yeah, that gives us quite a nice geographical footprint. And and they're one of the oldest. Obviously, they're also facing more competition because companies like National Mobile, etc., are competing in the space. But as we're moving into voice minutes as well, that's obviously enabling us to double the average sale.
And again, you offer the complete ambit. You're not just doing ADSL or dial-up. You've got 3G. You've got iBurst, if I'm correct. You're not going to a client and saying it's this. You're saying to the client what can work for you or the consumer.
Yes, and we even added Neotel to the list.
Okay, and Neotel. How many franchises?
there's about 200 odd franchises, and then there's a lot of resellers as well. So sometimes what will happen is a franchise will work in a, say, western area of Gauteng, and then they'll have 4 or 5 IT shops in that region.
Gotcha. So customers in that space?
Customers, about 150,000.
150,000. Okay, that's a fairly large chunk. Before we touch on results, deal stream last year largely behind you. I mean, that's happened. You've got RMB as a stakeholder. They're on the board. Is that unfortunate but history?
Yes.
Pending court cases.
Clearly, the company's point of view, we've got a stronger share base. There's not so many geared positions. I mean, at one stage we were 50